for this community. Today, let's remember these people who built the municipality over years. This is what's most important. Together, the people of l'Île Verte will know how to rise up above and continue on. And I'd like to congratulate the first responders, the firefighters who worked so hard during difficult conditions. Our thoughts and prayers are with the community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honor to inform the House that the Clerk of the House has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a certificate of election and return for Mr. Emmanuel Dubourg, member of the Electoral District of Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to present to you Mr. Emmanuel Dubourg, member for the Electoral District of Bourassa, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
Presenting to you Mr. Emmanuel Dubourg, MP for the Electoral District of Bourassa. He has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to seat.
Let the honourable member take his seat.
I have the honour to inform the House that the Clerk of the House has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a certificate of the election and return of Mr. Ted Falk, member for the Electoral District of Provencher.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present to you Mr. Ted Falk, member for the Electoral District of Provencher, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present to you Mr. Ted Falk, member for the Electoral District of Provencher, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
I have the honour to inform the House that the Clerk of the House has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a certificate of the election and return of Ms. Chrystia Freeland, member for the Electoral District of Toronto Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour of presenting you Ms. Chrystia Freeland, member for the Electoral District of Toronto Centre. She has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take her seat. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present to you Ms. Chrystia Freeland, member for the Electoral District of Toronto Centre, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take her seat. Let the honourable member take her seat.
I have the honour to inform the House that the Clerk of the House has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a certificate of the election return of Mr. Larry Maguire, member for the Electoral District of Brandon-Souris.
Speaker, I have the honour to present to you Mr. Larry Maguire, member for the electoral district of Brandon-Souris, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present to you Mr. Larry Maguire, member for the electoral district of Brandon-Souris, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
Let the member take his seat. Oral questions. Questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Excellent.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by wishing all of you and our excellent team an excellent 2014, and as well our clerk, who is there to make our democratic life more efficient and pleasant.
Can the Prime Minister update the House on the deeply troubling situation in the Ukraine and what action Canada is taking to play a positive role in resolving this matter? The
situation in Ukraine is very worrisome. Can the government inform Canadians about the latest developments and tell us what Canada intends to do to help defuse this crisis? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have certainly condemned the actions.
Very outspoken with many around the international community and condemning some of the actions of the Ukrainian government. We are very concerned that these actions speak not moving towards a free and democratic Euro-Atlantic future, but very much towards an anti-democratic Soviet past. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to vocalize our concerns, to work with the Ukrainian Canadian community and our allies to take all appropriate actions necessary to encourage the government of Ukraine to move in a positive direction.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for his answer.
I wrote the Prime Minister about the deepening tragedy of suicides in Canada's military. The total number of deaths due to suicide in the last 2 months alone now stands at 8. 8 in 2 months. Will the Prime Minister make this growing crisis a personal priority?
Will the Prime Minister make this crisis of suicides in our military a personal priority? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, well, the government has a good record when it comes to mental health services to our veterans.
Some of the most developed programs in mental health for people in the armed forces in the entire world. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, we're concerned about individual cases and express our deep sympathies to those involved. But I think what remains very important is that our military people should be aware that mental health challenges are very real for people throughout society, including in the military. Supports are there, and we encourage those who need support to come forward.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
With the budget approaching, will the Prime Minister make good on his promise in last fall's throne speech to rein in basic banking fees at ATMs and on credit cards? Will the Prime Minister keep that promise to Canadians, yes or no?
Excellent. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government has expressed on a number of occasions our concerns with the effect of certain banking fees and practices on consumers and small business. We've taken various actions in the past, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to work with Canadians to take the appropriate actions in the future.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Privy Council Office, which reports directly to the Prime Minister, has just refused to release 27 of 28 documents about the expenses of Senators Duffy, Wallin, Brazeau, and Harb. A very simple question. Is the Prime Minister going to release those documents, yes or no? If he has nothing to hide, why won't he release them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, access to information requests are handled by independent public servants and by lawyers who make those judgments according to the law, Mr. Speaker, and obviously it is up to them to respond in the appropriate way.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Privy Council Office is under the direct authority of the Prime Minister. Those people can say what he's allowed to not release. They can't stop him from releasing something in the public interest. Why doesn't he release them if he's got nothing to hide? The Senator
Liberal Senator Mac Harb is also under criminal investigation for fraud in connection with the sale of 99.99% ownership in his residence near Ottawa to a diplomat from Brunei, Magdalene Teo. She told the RCMP that she had a personal relationship with Mr. Harb, but she is refusing to help. Will the Prime Minister...
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, there is an process as with the RCMP as there is for access to information, and we have all the confidence necessary in the RCMP to do its work.
Member for Papineau.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are worried because they know they need training to get good jobs. But the provinces have rejected the Canada Job Grant, the signature economic policy of last year's budget. No wonder the program would cost more money and help fewer people. So will the Prime Minister finally listen to the premiers and abandon his failed plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, unlike the Liberal Party, we think it's necessary for the Government of Canada to act directly to deal with job creation and skills mismatch in the labour market. Mr. Speaker, we provide significant support directly to the provinces for post-secondary education and for skills training. And this government remains absolutely committed to the notion that to address some of these problems, we need to get employers and institutions and individuals who are looking for work working together to fill jobs that can be filled.
The Honourable Member for Papineau. Various provinces have specific challenges for their particular job market. This government created a program that was unacceptable, and the provinces have rejected it en masse. When will the Prime Minister abandon his paternalistic approach and work with the provinces to help Canadians get the job training they need to be able to find work? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, this government has already provided a great deal of money to the provinces for post-secondary education and for labour training. But there are certain skills needed for the workplace. It is important to resolve this problem to create jobs. Mr. Speaker, obviously, we have a different approach from the Liberal government. We know that we have a job to promote job creation.
Mr. Speaker, let us be clear on this. The Canada Job Grant was the government's signature economic policy of the last budget. They spend millions of taxpayer dollars on partisan ads boosting it, but it is a mess. It was rejected by the provinces. It will cost more and help fewer people. So will the Prime Minister listen to the premiers and scrap this plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the Canada Job Grant was in fact very well received by those in the marketplace, by people who want to upgrade their skills and want to receive more training, want to gain jobs, and by employers who want to create jobs, Mr. Speaker. And for that reason, we remain fully committed to making sure we do everything we can to build on the very good job creation record of this country, but to make that record even better.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie.
Avec la GRC depuis qu'on se soit parlé ici en Chambre.
Did the government have any contact at all, either before or after the holidays? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, this government provides the RCMP with any information that it requests. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Submitted documents, emails, in federal court where Nigel Wright states that the Prime Minister gave the good to go on the deal with Duthie. If that isn't true, the question is, did the Prime Minister so inform the RCMP?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the financial transaction the RCMP is investigating, the RCMP itself has been very clear that I had no knowledge of that.
Absolutely.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Whatsoever to do with the question. There's another Nigel Wright in this whole scandal, Mr. Speaker. It's the Prime Minister's chief fundraiser sitting in the Senate, Irving Gerstein. On page 12 of the RCMP documents, Nigel Wright tells police that Senator Gerstein approved the initial $32,000 payoff to Mike Duffy. Why then is Mr. Gerstein still sitting next to the Prime Minister in the Conservative caucus?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The RCMP has made very clear there are two individuals under investigation. The individual referred to by the Leader of the NDP is not under investigation.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But he is in the caucus, and here's the problem. Is the Prime Minister's position that giving a $90,000 payoff to sitting Senator Mike Duffy is morally reprehensible, but approving a $32,000 payoff is good to go?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the NDP knows that those facts are not accepted, and as a matter of a public record, the individual he's making accusations against is not under any investigation.
The Honourable Member for Skeena-Berkeley Valley.
Speaker, in June 2012, Conservatives replaced Arthur Porter, the disgraced chair of the CSIS Watchdog Committee, with Conservative Chuck Strahl. We were already concerned about CSIS spying on Canadians and environmental charities who had the audacity to be critical of Enbridge's Northern Gateway pipeline proposal. And then we learned that Mr. Strahl was moonlighting as a paid lobbyist for who?
Enbridge.
For Enbridge, the same company that this watchdog was meant to be protecting. Mr. Strahl was forced to resign. But why did no Conservative recognize this blatant conflict of interest?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Strahl was not only not forced to resign, the Ethics Commissioner said very clearly there was not a scintilla of evidence that he had done anything wrong whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, Chuck Strahl is one of the most honourable and decent people I've ever worked with. In the Parliament of Canada. And Mr. Speaker, it is a shame that for the sake of his personal reputation, he decided he is no longer willing to provide a service.
The Honourable Member for Halifax.
Speaking of questionable ethics, recently the member from Renfrew had the bright idea to campaign against the incandescent light bulb. She's trying to turn the light out on her own government's legislation. But not only did she campaign against her own party's policy, but you go to the website and you can donate. Where does it bring you? To a Conservative riding association. This clearly breaks the rules. So the question is, what sanctions is this member facing for breaking the rules?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the members of this caucus are working day in and day out to represent their constituents, Mr. Speaker. In this particular case, of course, the member wanted to express an opinion that has been brought to her by her constituents, Mr. Speaker. As the members opposite know, on this side of the House, we are very free to represent our constituents, Mr. Speaker, as is evidenced by our voting patterns when private members' business comes before this House. Unlike the opposition, of course, who are whipped with every private member's vote, on this side of the House, we consider everything, we vote our conscience, and we do what's right for our constituents.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Talk about turning out the lights on accountability. Mr. Speaker, the principle of ministerial responsibility is a fundamental of the Westminster system, but the Conservatives have turned this on their head. They give their ministers a get-out-of-jail-free card anytime they need it. The latest to make use of it is the Heritage Minister. Now, hasn't anyone told her that you can't charge admission to the very groups that are coming to you for grants? What sanctions will this minister face?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I've said clearly on a number of occasions, I had absolutely nothing to do with the planning of this event. I proactively and very swiftly took actions to address this situation, and I proactively reported it to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. While she is doing her examination, I'm happy to help her with her work. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
That was great. I think we could get her a third-party manager just to keep help her on helping the Ethics Commissioner with her work. Mr. Speaker, This government is under investigation for a cover-up in the Prime Minister's office. And on December 19th, the Prime Minister was asked about plausible deniability in his office. He said, quote, "Yeah, well, Mr. Wright knows full well that I don't believe in that doctrine." Can the Prime Minister tell us, when did he make that clear to Mr. Nigel Wright?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, as I've said on a number of occasions, and as the Prime Minister has said, the moment he found out about this, he instructed his office to work and assist the RCMP in their investigation. Mr. Speaker, has been quite clear of the number of emails and information that has been turned over, that we are continuing to assist the RCMP in this investigation. I'd also like to take a moment to congratulate the member for recognizing all of the investments that we've continued to make across Northern Ontario over the holidays. Of course, he issued a press release outlining the number of investments we've made in his riding. Congratulate him for recognizing that. Unfortunately, he voted against all of those investments, Mr. Speaker, but we will continue to invest in Northern Ontario. Great jobs and economic growth in the area.
Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dola. Mr. Speaker, last Wednesday, the NDP received an answer to an access to information request concerning documentation from the Privy Council office about Senators Duffy, Brazeau, and Wallen. But the problem was it was just a bunch of blank pages. It is not that the PCO doesn't have the documentation. It won't provide it. What is the PCO hiding, and at whose request?
Of course, Mr. Speaker, rules with respect to access of information are handled, and requests are made by independent public servants, Mr. Speaker, and the information that is required is made by those individuals following the law.
The Honourable Member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, there's deep anguish in Canada about the Yanukovych regime in Ukraine and its attacks on human rights and freedoms. Beyond general statements about considering options with respect to Yanukovych, will Canada specifically, 1, send official observers to scrutinize what's going on, 2, provide expedited visas to any victims who need to leave that country for their own safety, and 3, target Yanukovych and his crowd with personal sanctions, asset freezes and travel bans, for example, to push them to stop their anti-democratic behavior?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we have been active on this file. I can tell you that the Minister has condemned the killing in the strongest possible terms, the killing of protesters by the Ukrainian police force. He has personally spoken with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Leonid Kozara. In addition, the Deputy Minister has called in the Ukrainian ambassador to express Canada's condemnation of the violence that has occurred. We fully support the efforts by the members from Etobicoke Centre and Selkirk Inlet to bring this issue forward for emergency debate in the House of Commons, and we're urging the Ukrainian government to find a political solution by engaging in a real dialogue. We stand with the Ukrainian people who courageously continue to speak out in support of democracy.
The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, the disastrous December job statistics should get this government out of its stupor. There are still 275,000 Canadians without work, that many more than before the recession. The Conservative solution is an advertising campaign to promote a job program that doesn't even exist. Will the minister finally come up with a real plan to help Canadians who don't have jobs in his next budget? The Honourable Minister of Finance.
I thank the Honourable Member for his first question in the House. Our government is focused on the creation of jobs. In fact, over 1 million net new jobs have been created in Canada since July 2009, since the end of the recession. Over 80% of those jobs have been in the private sector. For the 6th straight year, the World Economic Forum ranked our banks the soundest in the world. And as you know, it was just last week that Bloomberg rated Canada the second best place after Hong Kong in the world in which to do business. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kings Hanks.
Mr. Speaker, in December, young Canadians lost another 12,000 jobs. In fact, there are 264,000 fewer jobs for young Canadians today than before the downturn. Canadian youth struggle to find work, and Canadian parents struggle to pay the bills. Instead of wasting millions of tax dollars to advertise a jobs program that doesn't even exist,
Will the Finance Minister admit there's a problem and commit to a real jobs plan for young Canadians in the upcoming budget? Or is he so out of touch with young Canadians and their struggling middle-class families?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
I have triplet young Canadians who would disagree with me. I must say that, you know, we have a great job creation record in this country. The best among the Western democracies since the end of the recession. And as I said a moment ago, they're mainly full-time jobs, and that is something I think that serves young Canadians well. We also have a good education system, and that serves them well as well.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, we are witnessing an urgent and growing need for better access to mental health services for Canadian Forces members. But the hiring of mental health professionals was stymied by internal red tape and budget cuts. Under the Conservatives, we are not meeting the needs of the military. This is unconscionable. Military suicides have shocked the country. The Leader of the Opposition has asked the Prime Minister to make this a personal priority. Will he now do so?
The Honourable Minister.
This certainly has been a priority with this government, Mr. Speaker, and with our armed forces. Now, our thoughts and prayers go out to all those who have suffered and to the families who have suffered in these instances, Mr. Speaker. With that being said, we do take the issue very seriously, and again, we are reviewing whether further enhancements are needed to ensure that the armed forces are responding to the needs of the members of the armed forces and veterans.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, this is a question of respect for our troops. With the crisis that is hitting the Canadian Forces, it is more than time to take concrete measures with regard to mental health. Our demands are clear: to make the hiring of mental health professionals a priority and to expedite the work of the some 50 commissions of inquiry underway on death by suicide within the Canadian Forces. We must give the families the answers they need so that they can grieve in peace. What is the Minister's answer? The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
This gave to her colleague, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to make this a priority because that is entirely appropriate. And what she and the members of her party could do would start supporting the efforts that we have made to support our men and women in uniform and our veterans. That would certainly be a welcome change, Mr. Speaker. I think everybody would appreciate that.
Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Saint-Constant. Well, we need more of a budget because it's not enough, and it's not just the service delivery to our troops that are suffering from Conservative cuts. This week, the Conservatives are going to shut down 8 Veterans Affairs offices. Many veterans will not even have any more access to adequate processing of their files within their own communities. Does the Minister understand that this decision to cut human resources cannot be replaced by voicemail or a website? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government has made substantial investments to support Canada's veterans, including almost $5 billion in new additional dollars since taking office. This funding has been put towards improved financial benefits, world-class rehabilitation and tuition costs to help veterans transition to civilian life. While our government is making improvement to veterans benefits, Liberals and the NDP have voted against this new funding for mental health treatment, financial support, and home care services, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sackville, Eastern Shore.
Mr. Speaker, what utter nonsense. The fact is, these offices provide invaluable services to the heroes of our countries. Those offices that are closing on Friday, Mr. Speaker, will no longer be able to deliver that one-on-one personal care that the heroes of our country so rightfully deserve. Those offices are closing on Friday, but the government has a chance to do the right thing. Many veterans are on the Hill this week, and many veterans, RCMP members and their families across the country are watching this government closely. Will the government now do the right thing, reverse that decision, keep these offices open so the heroes of our country can get the valuable service they so rightfully deserve?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, our government has created 600 new points of service across the country to assist Canadian veterans. Canadian veterans have access to 17 operational stress injury clinics across Canada to help them rehabilitate from service injury. A critically injured veteran does not have to drive to a district office. Our government will send a registered nurse or a case manager to visit them in the comfort of their own home. Veterans who are seriously injured can count on their government to shovel their driveway, Mr. Speaker, clean their homes, cut their grass, and so they can remain in their homes comfortably with dignity and respect that they deserve, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Tobic-Mactaquac.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2006, our Conservative government and our Finance Minister have brought forward 8 consecutive budgets to promote low-tax plan to create jobs and economic growth in Canada, including over 1 million net new jobs since 2009. But the economy remains fragile, and Canada is not immune to those economic challenges beyond our borders. We need to move forward with a low-tax plan for jobs and growth, not an NDP plan of higher taxes and massive deficit spending. Would the Minister of Finance inform the House when our government will present Budget 2014?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government is focused on what matters to Canadians, that is jobs and economic growth. Economic Action Plan 2014 will continue our government's focus on keeping Canada's economy stronger by introducing positive measures to grow our economy, create jobs, keep taxes low, and return to balanced budgets in 2015. I am pleased to, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to request the designation of an order of the day for the Finance Minister to present Budget 2014, Economic Action Plan 2014, on Tuesday, February 11th, 2014, at 4 p.m.
The honourable member for Parkdale, High Park.
Monsieur le Président, j'espère que...
Mr. Speaker, I hope that I won't have to read the details of the budget in the Globe and Mail this year. While the Minister of Finance continues to correct the errors from his last budget, it is Canadians who are paying the price. Job losses increased in December, and the unemployment rate rose. Instead of cutting in EI and inventing hasty measures that have to be cancelled in subsequent budgets, will the Conservatives make helping the unemployed a priority in their next budget? The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, that is precisely what was done by this government in January 2009, which resulted in a large deficit. But it did protect Canada. It protected Canada from double-digit unemployment, much better than other Western democracies. And we have kept our promise to get back to a balanced budget in the medium term, which we will in 2015.
The honourable member for Parkdale, High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it just shows what an effective opposition can do. When it's time to act, Mr. Speaker, when it's time to act, the only action they take is to attack the unemployed, as if they were the problem. Canadians are unhappy about the mess Conservatives have created with the EI. Even the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans recognized that people are angry and are leaving her province because of it. Will Conservatives stop sitting on their hands and do something about the harmful impact of their own actions on the unemployed?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, I was here in 2009. I think the honourable member was also. Her party and herself voted against that budget. That was the budget that kept Canada out of double-digit unemployment, which brought Canada out of recession the fastest of all of the Western democracies after only 3 quarters. How short memories can be.
Non-honourable
The Honourable Member for Gaspésie-La-Madeleine. Mr. Speaker, as for the Conservatives' failing memory, I think we'll have to bring them back to today. The Conservatives have no plan with regard to our rail system or with regard to its safety. Not only is cargo transport unsafe, but all of Eastern Canada is about to see the disappearance of via passenger service. We've already lost services in the Gaspésie, and now the closure of the CN line in New Brunswick will leave thousands of people without service. Will the minister come and explain to the citizens of Quebec and all of Eastern Canada why they don't have the right to a proper passenger rail service that is safe and reliable? The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, VIA is an independent corporation from the Canadian government. As such, it takes its own decisions when it comes to provision of services across this great country. However, that being said, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud that we do have great outreach, both within Transport Canada and my office as well, too, in talking to citizens and Canadians across the country. And I can tell you one thing, Mr. Speaker, that we do listen and we do hear what people are saying. But the matter of fact is, if people aren't utilizing the services, Mr. Speaker, it's not for the rest of the country in order to supplement it.
The Honourable Member for Acadie-Bathurst. Mr. Speaker, VIA needs railways. The Conservatives did nothing when Gaspé was abandoned by Via Rail. And the New Brunswick government and CN invested $25 million each in the railway that links Moncton to Miramichi and Bathurst to Campbellton. But with the closure of the CN line between Miramichi and Bathurst, all of Eastern Canada is going to find itself in the same situation. Many times the province has called for support from the federal government to keep the line open, but the Conservatives have refused to invest. What is the government going to do to ensure that the east to west Via Rail from Miramichi to Bathurst remains open? Where are the Conservative members? The Honourable Minister of Transport.
The reality is, Mr. Speaker, our government supports a Via Rail system that provides excellent service to passengers, but at the same time is respectful of the efficient use of a taxpayer dollar. Unfortunately, Via has to make decisions all the time when it comes to provision of passenger service based upon the volume of people utilizing the service. I encourage the member to talk to Via about the provision of service, and I'd like to thank the member for his question.
The Honourable Member for Avalon.
Mr. Speaker, in November 2010, the Conservatives held a teletown hall in the tightly contested Vaughan by-election. Once again, the Conservatives are overspending in elections since this was never reported to Elections Canada by the now Minister of International Cooperation. Apparently, 15,000 people took part in this town hall. Wonder what the big draw was? None other than their buddy, Mike Duffy. My question is to the Minister of...
Order. I haven't heard anything at this point that has to do with government business. The member has a few seconds left. I urge that the question actually touch on the administration of government. So I'll allow him to finish his question, but I do hope it actually addresses ministerial responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, my question is to the Minister of Democratic Reform. Can he confirm that Elections Canada is actively investigating this breach?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, Elections Canada governs itself and will make its own determinations.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Quadra.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative candidates appear to have a big problem respecting election campaign laws, and this will relate to government business. A long list of Conservatives have been caught cheating on campaign spending and reporting, and they got little more than a slap on the wrist for it. And the Vaughan telephone town hall is just the latest example of systemic campaign rule breaking. Mr. Speaker, can the minister tell us if the long-delayed Elections Act amendments will include serious penalties for those who violate campaign spending limits? Finally.
The Honourable Minister of Democratic Reform.
Including leader.
Mr. Speaker, the bill that the member mentions will be introduced in time for implementation before the next election. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac.
Mr. Speaker, how much of our money is this government going to waste? That's the question that people in my riding are asking.
They are sick of seeing these non-stop economic action plan ads on TV, yet the Conservatives keep spending our money on them. The $10 million that was budgeted to brag about it, well, that wasn't enough. They blew that budget spending $14.8 million of taxpayers' money on blatant self-promotion. When is it going to stop, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Responsibility of any government to communicate with the population on plans and priorities and policies that are actually passed by this Parliament, Mr. Speaker. I think it's our obligation and indeed our pleasure to do so. Of course, we want to inform Canadians about the great economic policies that are found each year in the budgets, and we will do so again, I'm sure. But, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should look within his own house. I mean, speaking of advertising, they had thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars of illegal advertising at their last convention, Mr. Speaker. How about that, Mr. Speaker? That is a violation of trust, I would say.
The honourable member for Pontiac.
We're talking about taxpayers' money, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the situation is so absurd that they are advertising for programs that don't even exist. The Canadian Standards Association has, in fact, stated that this is false advertising, but they don't invest 1 cent, not 1 red cent, in TV ads to educate people about the importance of getting the flu shot, for example. It is to the point where Conservative propaganda is more important than public health. Mr. Speaker, will the Conservatives stop wasting money on boosting their image? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board. As I already said, Mr. Speaker, the government has the responsibility to inform the Canadian public about the programs and services that are important to them. And the 2013 Economic Action Plan, the 2012 Economic Action Plan, well, for that, advertising is an important means for the government to inform the public about the programs that have been adopted under this Parliament. Thank you.
The honourable member for Provencher.
Mr. Speaker, what an honour this is. Last week, our Prime Minister made history by being the first Canadian Prime Minister to address the Knesset. His trip to Israel reinforces the close friendship between our countries and our partnership. The solidarity that exists between our countries on a range of global issues. Israel has no closer friend than Canada. Our government is committed to advancing a principled foreign policy that is based on the values of freedom, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Can the Minister of Natural Resources please update this House on the Prime Minister's recent trip to Israel?
Well done.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
To welcome again the member from Provencher. I was honoured to join the Prime Minister on his historic visit to Israel, a friend and ally with whom we share the core values of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. The Prime Minister's extraordinary speech to the Knesset, the receipt of an honorary doctorate, the moving visit to the Holocaust Museum in Yad Vashem, and the Western Wall were among the memorable visits. And I was also encouraged by the potential to build our bilateral trade and cooperation in science and technology and our overall strategic relationship.
The honourable member for St. Paul's.
Mr. Speaker, last month's ice storm was devastating across the whole of the Greater Toronto Area. Citizens of the GTA are looking to their national government to be there with them in their time of need. GTA mayors and regional chairs voted unanimously to ask the provincial and federal governments to help cover the estimated $275 million costs. Will the government confirm that it will release the necessary funds through the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement and support the GTA?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, we have a province that is working with all provinces and territories. It's the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement. This is a cost-sharing program which has a threshold, which trigger. Mr. Speaker, this is a non-political program that is working very well for all parts of the country, and we will always stand by provinces and territories who are in help following the rules of this program. Thank you.
The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I have here a list of 35 qualified construction workers who have refused work at the new Women's Hospital project in my riding because temporary foreign workers are already doing the job on a phony permit that they should never have received. The Prime Minister says he's getting tough on foreign worker fraud, yet they've known about this situation for more than 10 months, Mr. Speaker. There shouldn't be a single foreign national on that site if there's a single qualified Canadian ready and able to take that work. Why won't the minister stand up for Canadian workers, tear up this bogus permit, and let the Canadian taxpayers who paid for this job get the jobs and the wages and the benefits from this project?
Minister of Employment.
I thank the member for the question, Mr. Speaker. Let's be clear. It is illegal to use temporary foreign workers to do work that has not been offered to Canadians at the prevailing regional wage rate, and which jobs, of course, receive the same protection and legal framework as jobs available to Canadian citizens. So I'd appreciate receiving information from the member. We are bringing forward a regulatory package to crack down with much more stringent sanctions on employers who abuse the temporary foreign worker program, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that it is only and always a last resort and the Canadians always have the first crack at available jobs.
The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to represent the people of Brandon Souris, who last fall once again voted for trusted leadership and strong economic management. Since being elected, I've been meeting with constituents who all understand that one of the main industries driving our local economy is agriculture. Pork and cattle producers in southwestern Manitoba have been calling for a timely and responsive program to help protect them when commodity prices go down. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture please tell the House about the recent launch of the Livestock Price Insurance Program?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate the new member for Brandon Souris on having taken his place amongst us here today. And he is absolutely right. Canadians want a government that puts the economy first. The Livestock Price Insurance Program will help protect Western livestock producers against unexpected price declines. The Canadian Cattlemen's Association has said the following, quote, "This program gives more producers access to a solid tool to manage price and basis risk." Mr. Speaker, the constituents of Brandon Souris can rest assured that under this Prime Minister, we will continue to give farmers the tools they need to grow jobs and strengthen our economy.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, in mid-January, there was once again an emission of toxic red dust in Limoilou. The Quebec Port Authority acknowledged that it was the source of this dust, but both the port and the company are hiding behind the federal government to avoid having to take action. And the federal government is hiding behind the provincial government to avoid having to take action. The citizens of Limoilou deserve better than being caught up in the midst of a jurisdictional squabble because no one wants to assume their responsibilities. Why are the Conservatives refusing to protect the health of the citizens of Limoilou? The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while the Quebec Port Authority is indeed an arm's-length organization of the federal government, it is my understanding that the company involved, the tenant, with respect to this emission, is working with the provincial authorities regarding environmental issues, and they will continue to do so. And of course, we encourage the Port of Quebec to do so as well.
Honourable Member for Richmond-Arthabaska. Well, after trying to impose their skills training program and a securities commission, both rejected by Quebec, the federal government is now trying to encroach on another exclusive jurisdiction, education. Ottawa wants to choose the number and the origin of foreign students without taking into consideration the distinct characteristics of Quebec, like its language and cultural links with other countries. It is up to the government of Quebec to determine its needs with regard to foreign students, not Ottawa. Will the Minister of International Trade respect Quebec's jurisdiction in education and grant it the right to opt out with full compensation, as it is calling for? The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
International education is a priority sector and a key component of Canada's new Global Markets Action Plan, which seeks to advance Canada's commercial interests in our priority markets. International education is a key driver of economic growth in Canada, with over 265,000 students generating over $8 billion a year in our economy. The international education strategy is the product of extensive consultations with the provinces, the territories and stakeholders, and we will continue to advance Canada's interests on the international stage by promoting our world-class education system.
The honourable member for Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have been outraged by the dismantling of government libraries, such as those dealing with fisheries, forests and our health. Under the Library and Archives of Canada Act, these materials are protected as the documentary heritage of Canadians. Surplus materials are to be placed in the care and control of the librarian and archivist, and materials and records cannot be destroyed without the written consent. Now, I've spoken to the current librarian and archivist of Canada, and it appears to me the Act was not followed. Will the Prime Minister commit to immediately investigating whether these acts in closing libraries and casting the materials to the winds, to dumpsters and to looters was legal, and restore and protect the documentary heritage?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, nothing of the sort could be any further from the truth. Original materials will be preserved. Duplicate materials that nobody wants will be disposed of in the usual manner. Mr. Speaker, information which was available in the libraries continues to remain available in the digital world. Welcome to this century. I will tell you that this allows more people to access that information and at less cost to the taxpayers. That's the truth, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Ahuntsic. Mr. Speaker, on December 20th, the Supreme Court of Canada struck down provisions concerning living off the avails of prostitution, soliciting, and keeping a body house. We know that prostitution is a form of exploitation and violence that mainly affects women and children. Does the Minister of Justice intend to draft a new legal framework to fight prostitution by making it illegal and by criminalizing the purchase of sexual services rather than those who are being prostituted? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Obviously, we are very concerned by the Supreme Court ruling, which overturned certain provisions of the Criminal Code. We are exploring all possibilities in order to protect women and young girls who are made vulnerable by this practice. Obviously, contrary to the Liberal Party, which wants to legalize prostitution, which would put women more at risk, we will examine the best solutions for women in order to protect them because they are vulnerable.
That concludes question period for today.
There have been discussions, and I believe that there is unanimous consent for observing a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the fire in Île Verte. I would invite all honourable members to rise.